My friend, are you struggling with any challenges in your life right now, presently, dealing with some severe adversity that you don't know what to do with, how to get out of it, or even how you will succeed? If you answered yes to any one of those points, then this podcast is for you. My name is Bernie from Tiger Resilience, where I specialize in behavioral health and personal development.
And my name is Michael, and I specialize in physical health and fitness and personal development.
And together we make Tiger Resilience and the Tiger Resilience podcast, where we are going to help you reach your human potential. So we're going to talk about two constructs that we utilize as metaphors in our business model here. One is the tiger and the other one is the phoenix. So what does the tiger represent? The tiger represents power symbol of resilience, of strength and tenacity and overcoming challenges. It is a ferocious animal that never gives up. And Mike is going to talk about the phoenix.
Yeah, so the concept of the phoenix is essentially the power symbol of renewal, the ability to kind of overcome adversity, transform yourself, and emerge stronger and better from those challenges that you might suffer and experience in your life.
So, and together, those two constructs really are the core elements of what we do in our program here at Tiger Resilience, because we utilize the strength of resilience and overcoming adversity, but we also focus on the rebirth. And rebirth is simply when we fall down, we get back up. That is, life is always an evolution of change, and everything is changing. And just again, like the metaphor of the phoenix, exactly what we're going through. So I want to break down three ideas behind the phoenix specifically, and we're going to correlate those into two stories, actually two very personal stories, one of Michael's and one for myself, that will help bring us all in together on what we're going to really give you as a resource going out of here, some tools and some information that will help you if you are struggling again with any adversity or challenges. So the phoenix has three basic constructs that we deal with. The destruction, what happens? The rebirth, what are we doing with it? And then the renewal, and that is the outcome. What happens from as a result of these three areas that we work with? And I'm going to let Michael share his story first, because it's a really powerful story. And again, we're going to break these down into the three different areas of the destruction. What was the rebirth? And then what was the renewal? So Mike, why don't you take it away? Let's hear about your story, because it's a really, really a very powerful story. And I know that somebody is going to learn from this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So kind of highlighting the 3 points here, starting with the idea of the destruction. So with my story, this was from high school. I run track and field, avid runner. And my senior year of high school, I was kind of running, doing a training run in preparation for a meet that was going to occur that Saturday. And in preparation for this run, I was outside. I was on a trail that I had never really gone on before, right by my high school. And on this run, on the trail, I had with two other people with me, training partners, and about 2 miles into this trail, we heard what was essentially a loud noise, a bang, would end up becoming, or to our understanding, a gunshot. So during this experience, we running on this trail were identified by hunters thinking that we were actually deer. And in this process, they shot at us, and one of those pellets or gunshots went into my left calf during the run, and I immediately felt a prick in my left calf, and I got to the ground, kind of traumatized by the event. It was something that I couldn't even really fathom what was going on. Thankfully, there wasn't anything beyond that, in terms of a potential death or anything like that. It just was, unfortunately, an experience where, an accident had occurred and, had affected me and my body. So in this experience, though, that kind of concept of destruction, it was my senior of high school. So I had really large expectations and, personal goals for myself. And so to have something like this where I knew this was going to be a pretty significant injury was really difficult to process in the moment, especially as a 17-year-old kid. So from there, I kind of had to, I went, to the hospital, was diagnosed and looked at, and obviously this pellet in my calf was going to be something that we had to, kind of look at and address it with, doctors that probably specialize in trauma-induced events. So kind of identifying that concept of the rebirth. So I went to the Boston Red Sox trauma team as a reference to by other doctors, just because of their specialty and expertise, especially with sports trauma. And in their assessment, the doctors, kind of essentially said, you're not going to be unable to walk, of course, and even run in any capacity, but the idea of probably like running competitively and having those set goals that you had for your senior year in these next, say 5 months are not going to be, a realistic thing for you, just given, this injury and that timeline of events in terms of a recovery process. So hearing that, it really was a very challenging thing. And especially again, as a 17-year-old kid who I think, a large part of my identity at that time was tied to, my running and track and field. So it felt like, just like kind of like taking away everything that I had in a sense. Of course I had my family, my friends, everyone that was super supportive and, be a life ahead of me really. But, when you have such a attachment and focus to a certain thing, it can really be a difficult thing to hear that's kind of taken away from you. So, going through that, I had to kind of formulate a plan that maybe externally I could, find myself able to train in some capacity and still like set goals for the ones that I've, already created at the start of the year for track and field. So it was a diligent process. It was something where I, with a coach, a personal coach named Jeff Smith, who had won the Boston Marathon twice in 1984 and 85, was able to kind of, develop something that, look, it might not be where I want it to be, in terms of what we had set out before, but if it has to be altered and it still allows me to kind of think in my mind that I can achieve these goals in some capacity, that was just all I cared about really. And so just creating, an alternative plan based on, again, with some guidance of the doctors, because, they didn't say that it was necessarily I couldn't run again, just that they didn't see it as a feasible thing for me to be able to, maybe achieve the levels that I wanted to based on, the injury itself. And so, yeah, in that rebirth process, it was creating this plan and going through it with just rigorous tenacity and training, with that mindset that I wasn't going to allow this to, take away from me in any way. And then ultimately the final concept being the renewal, where, after that kind of relentless and consistent and persistent effort with, creating a plan that I stuck to diligently, within about a month later, I was able to return to the track in a competitive meet. And then later that indoor season, which was around about probably a 8 to 12 week period, I set our school record and was, top 10 in the state for my event. And then going into the spring season, also set multiple school records and was one of the better runners in the state. So I think that renewal process for me wasn't necessarily just breaking the record or these kind of more like objective measures, which are super important, but it was just the idea that I was renewed as a person because I kind of overcame such an adverse thing for someone at 17 who had really never experienced trauma like that in my life. I had such a amazing supportive family and friends growing up, and it wasn't something where I ever felt like I had, any pressing difficulties in life, but to experiencing something like this where it was, pretty traumatic for me, especially as a 17-year-old, that process of renewal and being able to overcome that and achieve my goals and feel confident and happy with it was so important. So, just going through those and hindsight now being able to establish these concepts of through our Tiger Resilience, about that is super important. So yeah, and my father will talk about his story as well. But I think these personal anecdotes can be incredibly powerful for people because we all have those stories for ourselves, and then we can utilize these concepts to identify, how to get through them, and then going forward, how to use them again if we ever, overcome a challenge that we'll inevitably experience in life.
Yeah, wow, Mike, it really so truthful in that story, and I will also emphasize because being there with him during that time frame, again, the two fundamentals is the event itself being so unique because in the area we lived in southeast Massachusetts, a little town called Mattapoisett, it's almost an unheard of thing that somebody would have an episode like that. But also for the maturity of him at 17 years old to really to have been able to take that and transition that to turn it around, in his life as well. And I do remember the ride back from Boston and talking with Mike, and he looked at me. He said, Dad, what are we going to do? They're telling me I'm not necessarily going to be able to run competitively anymore, and I worked my whole life to do this, and and I did not have an answer for him. Well, he said, as I said, I know there is an answer. I don't know what it is yet, but I know that if you're willing and want to do the work, we will find a way. And, through Jeff Smith, a friend of ours that assisted Mike greatly with that process too. But it was a fact that there was a solution. All right. Sometimes we don't see it clearly right away, but we have to know in our hearts that mindset piece. We'll talk a moment about that. That's a key element to it too. So, Mike, that was a tremendous story, and ironically, the story I'm going to share as well. It was also happened at the age of 17. Not that 17 seems to be the paradigm shift of life from good to bad to good, but it just happens to be more. And again, I don't believe in coincidences, but just as transitions in our life. So for myself, at the age of when I was younger, my father got sick with cancer. And by the time I was 11, he had passed away after 2.5 years of struggling with that. And when he passed away, he was truly the rock of Gibraltar for the family. And my mother, who was not a very strong person, the family really began to disintegrate very quickly. Myself and my two siblings and my mother. And my mother shortly afterwards remarried again with a gentleman who did not have any interest really in children. And our family truly began to just disintegrate. Everything broke apart. And at the age of 15, when they got remarried, it was kind of the beginning of the end for me. By the time I was 17 years old, I was homeless, locked out of the house, not having an interest in children. Again, my stepfather, I was, no fault of my own, basically homeless. And I remember living in New York, Central Park, Snowbank, as a 17-year-old kid, scared, did not have any resources or anybody to really connect with or what to do. But I had this, and this is certainly where the destruction is, where, something happens tragically with my father's death. And sadly, that was a horrific thing. And sadly, that he didn't get to have his life, fulfilled longer as, dying at the age of 37. But more so what that did to the entire family system, and then how it just tragically, like a domino effect, just fell, and piece after piece just fell right after. But at that point, I realized that there's still hope. So that was my destruction. But so where did this rebirth come in? Well, I was listening to, it was Christmas time, and I remember this vividly. And there was Christmas music playing, and I remember there were families all around outside of Columbus Circle, and they were all doing their thing. They were together, they're shopping. There was this Christmas music in the background. The Christmas lights were out, and I remember looking at them and realizing it's like, you know what? If they could do it, I could do it too. I didn't know how. I didn't know. I did not have the first clue of what that would look like. But all I knew is that if it was possible, if it was a human possibility, and I could see it clearly with all these other families and relationships, that I could find a way to make it work for myself too. And it was through that process that changed my mindset to say, you know what, I can do this. And I became tenacious in wanting to absorb everything I can, education, to learn every possible thing I can learn, and then to build myself up from that point, knowing that I could also do what other folks could do. I know I might have to work 5 times harder, and it may take me 5 times longer, but I could still do it if somebody else could do it. And that was what instilled in me that fire that brought up to where I started my success early on. And the ability was to just absorb everything I can. I was a voracious learning. I wanted to learn everything I could. And I always had an open mind. I listened with the intention to understand things and try to learn. And as a result of that, I was able to pull myself out of that situation in a short period of time at 17. And by the age of 24, was able to achieve my first milestone, which was a general manager working in a retail industry. And I had two assistant managers and 80 employees underneath me at the age, and I was the youngest one at that time for this group, this franchise group that I was as a general manager, and that set in motion my future learning, going back to school to develop myself and learn about behavioral health, psychology, and all the things that I bring to the table here today. But the key piece here, and that is certainly the renewal, is that aspects that we were able to overcome that and become these different people on the other end, both Mike and myself. But the real key takeaways here is really would like to emphasize is, and we talk about this too, growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Now, a fixed mindset is somebody who would have looked at that situation, like in Michael's case, and I'll let him talk about that certainly, but that he was never going to run again. And that's what these professional doctors said. And they weren't doing that in a malicious manner. They based on what they saw in front of them, they were just giving their diagnosis, you diagnose, then you prescribe. The prescription for them was that you'll run, but you're not going to be competitive anymore. In my situation, again, very similar too. It's like, well, this adversity happened to you, so the fixed mindset is like, oh well, it's just I'll never get any better. It'll never change. The poor me. Kind of playing the violin piece a little bit too. But here's the other end of that: the growth mindset. Where does that growth mindset change? It's the ability to look at it from a different perspective and say, what could be done? What is the possibilities here? And I'll let Mike talk a little bit about his growth mindset when it came to overcoming that challenge, especially when the coaches came and they told him, the doctors told him that he would not be able to run again. So Mike, why don't you talk a little bit about how you went from this very quick fixed mindset to this great and incredible growth mindset is what set in motion your success after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that idea of a fixed mindset is something that I still run through or have issues with all the time. You oftentimes we kind of just like limit what our capabilities are. It could be a level of insecurity or just, fear of the unknown. So in this case, yeah, I mean, there wasn't a great outlook on things in terms of the injury itself and what these doctors were saying. And obviously the utmost respect for medical professionals and, their diagnosis about this. But even in that diagnosis and what they were saying, I couldn't allow that to just be like my finality and something that was the end result for an endeavor that I just put so much time and effort and focus into. I wasn't going to allow that to be something that was like kind of the final chapter of that story. So, I think even if it is just starting from the idea of not allowing that to be your final chapter, with regards to, a fixed mindset, there are of course things that you're just simply, there might be limitations with body that, you just simply won't be able to. Of course, if I were to like break my leg and structurally just wasn't able to. But in this case, it wasn't at least severe enough where I couldn't run. It was just severe to the point where they didn't think it was feasible for me to run competitively or attain the goals that I had kind of set for myself with regards to, being one of the best in the state or setting some records. Again, these more objective goals that at the end of that renewal process actually weren't as important to me anymore as the process of just getting healthy and overcoming a really significant challenge. So yeah, I think just in identifying the difference between those two things and allowing yourself to really just kind of go all hands in with the idea of a growth mindset.
Yeah. Wow. So true. And and I appreciate the fact that you say that you still struggle with that. And I will say, and part of the dynamics of our podcast is this dichotomy between two generationals, with myself as a father looking at an older generation and my son looking at this from a younger generation, these perspectives and these paradigms. And yet there is this dichotomy, but there is also this semblance of overlap with them. And he mentioned before that no matter where you are in your journey, there's still always some self-doubt. The fixed mindset is always something that gets kind of introduced to us and sometimes can be a difficult challenge. But it's knowing on a daily basis that opportunity is there in front of us if we so choose to see it. And I think, again, going to that growth mindset, it's the ability for us to see that difference even before it can manifest. Because I'm of the firm believer that everything truly is created twice, which is truth, really, in a sense. It's created here first and then manifested in reality second. So the visual creation here is really what we're talking about when we discuss growth mindset. It's the ability to see that possibility, that future. What could this look like? Even though there's nothing in front of me that gives evidence that that is a possibility yet, but yet, like anything we've seen and everything we're doing right now, the technology we're using to produce this podcast, the ability of us in all of our journeys in life to utilize all these tools and resources we have, they all started originally as an idea before they were manifested into reality. And that's truly at the heart of what growth mindset is too. Another piece here that's really important is taking those opportunities and making them work for us, the adversity to make that work for us. The building of Tiger Resilience was really a direct result of working with so many people over the years and the challenges that they had, constantly trying to figure out how to deal with life challenges over and over again, and how to find their own personal best, how to reach their potential, how to define their purposes, and all of these challenges that unfortunately were never really taught when you're young and in school systems. And that really was at the heart of us starting this in the program, was because we could see that taking those opportunities of adversity and making them into something new into your life. And that really is also a big part of this whole entire program that we're running, but also what we're discussing here today too as well. Overcoming those challenges and making those the new opportunities. I looked at that world and saw that if somebody could do that, I could do that too. So the opportunity was there, but I wanted to even expand on that. I would look at that and say, well, they could do that, but how much further can I go? And I was always willing to push myself to that limit, as Mike talked about before with his training, that he was going through that. And it wasn't so much that he was going to be where he was prior and where he expected to be, but he was this new person as a result of that adversity, and he was approaching it completely different. And at the end turned out to be even better because of that, that's just the permanency of life. There's nothing that is constant but growth, right? We are always in growing. And that's a big piece of understanding that too, as well. And then another piece here too is also having the network and the resources too, and I'll let Mike talk a moment about his resources and his relationship with Jeff Smith, a family friend who is also very instrumental in helping him and guiding him through his running journeys too. But is finding those support systems. Now, I will say that in my particular story, I did not have a support system necessarily, not right from the get-go. But what I did have was the motivation of what I did not want. And I can share this because I remember at that age of being homeless, that my first week where I stayed outside of the snowbank in Central Park is I went to a Salvation Army. And as a 17-year-old kid, a majority of those folks that were in there were much older than I am. And it was an extremely terrifying place to be. Even at 17, it really was just a terrifying place to be and to witness and to be part of it. And I realized that that's something I did not want. And so sometimes that pain, that level of like something that we don't want, is just as highly motivating to get you to make a change. It's I have a health issue and I'm going to do whatever it takes to overcome that. My father was an example of that. When he was diagnosed with cancer, they gave him, basically he had about 6 months to live. He did not know that at that time, but I think he knew internally something was very wrong and that he was going to struggle with this. And though it was to a point where there was no return, he was never going to get past the fact that it was going to take his life. He ended up living close to 3 years as a result of changing every behavior about him, because he took control of that. He did not want to be that person who just succumbed to the disease and then just gave up and then just, went into that negative side. He turned it around to the best of his ability. And again, it gave him an additional close to 3 years as well, too, So Mike, why don't you share a little bit about yourself, talking about support networks? I know that you had some great
Yeah.
team members. Obviously you had your family, you had Jeff Smith. How instrumental were those things in helping you along that journey when you were overcoming those challenges?
Yeah, I think the network and the people you have around you are so critical. Like I kind of mentioned, never really experienced any trauma in my life, but I also think that probably was a large byproduct of the fact that I had such great support growing up, and I still do to this day through both my parents, my close friends at that time, really supportive and encouraging teammates on the track, and then my coach at the time, Jeff Smith, who was super instrumental and supportive for me, to achieve these goals that I kind of set for myself. So yeah, I can't stress enough how important the idea of having a group of people and who you surround yourself with as being like the kind of mold for your ability to be able to achieve whatever it is that you have set in mind for yourself. I do say too that it's like one of the things that I always thought about was the sport itself, just going back to my personal story with track and field, is very individual. And so running, you can oftentimes kind of get in your head, and you feel like you're by yourself, and you are, in a sense. On the track, you are by yourself running in most of these races competitively. But when you think about like the people that allowed you to achieve that goal during the time frame, with regards to my experience, and the help that they gave me, and the planning and the resource, like the actual like tangible resources, so whether it be my parents with supporting me monetarily with everything, and then friends supporting me picking me up for after that experience, or helping me when I was like on crutches, very, very just small things you don't think about in the moment, and you realize as those things compound how important that support group is. When you reflect on it, it's just like an amazing thing to think about. And it can be a very challenging thing without it. And to my dad's point, he didn't necessarily have that, and I think it shows that in both scenarios we have these very traumatic or experiences and stories, and you can have different outcomes without the resources. And in my case, I had them, my dad didn't, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to limit your ability to still overcome them. So I do think that that's an important point to mention as well.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And true. And again, it's not it's not so much having the resources. It's also to kind of piggyback off of that. Though I didn't have that necessarily support at that moment, I found ways to create those supports later on. But again, it's also realizing if you don't have any supports out there, if you're struggling with some challenges that is just absolutely very difficult, and you don't have anywhere to turn or anyone to go to, just know that whatever the challenges are, that you don't want to succumb to that. And you're going to look at yourself with that opportunity on the other end of it, saying, I can do this. I will find a way. I will make the way to have this turn this around in my life so that I can overcome this challenge. And I will find the resources along the way. And that's kind of where my story really was at the time. I didn't have it initially, but I did find those resources along the way. So just know that they are there, even if you don't have them initially too. So I'd like to kind of recap this a little bit too. So we discussed the emphasis of obviously overcoming the adversity by using growth mindset, not fixed mindset, right? Continuation of learning. And here's where I really do emphasize, and I'm not just saying just academic learning, everything you can do to learn about some of the things that you're dealing with and the challenges. What are the ways and perspectives that you can utilize to talk about a different way of looking at it? What is another solution? And again, this is where networking is really important, because you can take your solution to the challenges you're facing and then take two or three other people in your life and have them put their solutions in together for that same problem, and then you'll come up with a alternative with all those ideas together that no one alone can solve. And that's really the empowerment of the human condition, working together, where we become very interdependent with each other, working on those common solutions. So again, brainstorming this with other people. And again, if you don't have a network of folks, then look at some online services that you can use. Look for groups that you can connect with and say, hey, I've got this particular problem in a health-related issue, and a development issue with myself in a career. Maybe it's a relationship issue. There's thousands and thousands of groups out there that you can connect with, through social media alone, that you can look at as a resource. So, and then the other piece, again, outside of learning, is obviously building that network too, and building that as a fundamental or a foundational piece to your life. Those people that are there that are helping you now will be your cheerleaders for life. So develop that network and hold tight to that as you continue to move forward with it, because those individuals will always be there for you too as well. So I'd like to thank you first. Again, I'm Bernie from Tiger Resilience, and I want to thank you for taking a moment out of your busy life to stop by and watch this podcast. We have a lot of great podcasts coming up to talk about a lot of varieties of topics that will to discuss the physical and behavioral health of life and how do we overcome these challenges. And that's what Michael and I have as our specialties. Mike works with the physical and health and nutrition. I work on the behavioral health pieces, and we both take the two of those together and we correlate this into personal development, the human condition, we call it, the body, the mind, the heart, the spirit. So I'd like to thank you once again. Mike, any final words for the audience?
Yeah, just another thank you as well on my end. Being able to have and share these stories is really important, and we hope that in building this Tiger Resilience community, people can also be comfortable in sharing their own stories and challenges that they've experienced and overcome. I think, to my dad's point, there's going to be such an important component of establishing that community and people that you can talk to about these things and overcome with each other. It's very important. So yeah, I just want to say thank you again for allowing us to share our stories, and we really look forward to talking about more of these topics as it pertains to both behavior and physical health.
Thanks, Mike. And one last note for you folks, please, if you get any value of this, please do consider at least liking this video so we can pay this forward, as the algorithm works that way. You like a video, this can move it forward to folks that are struggling like yourself. And number two, if you have the opportunity to subscribe to our channels to get our weekly broadcasts, you'll get an update on that coming into your inbox from your YouTube channel as well too. In addition, in the description below, we'll have information about us and the show notes too. But also, we have the opportunity for you, if you're interested in joining our beta group right now, where we have the launch of our program that is dealing with overcoming adversity. And our program right now, this beta version, is the opportunity to get our online course, which will be developed and is finished up right now, and we'll be putting that out in a couple of weeks, and also our community, online monthly community that can assist you in also having these open conversations like we're discussing right now with a multitude of topics, that you can have full access to that free of charge. All we ask is that you sign up for it. The link will be below with all the information, and we'd like to have you come and join us. We only have room for 50. So after the 50 folks has been filled up, we will be having to close that off, but the program will be available for sale coming in June. So if you're interested in getting involved with the beta course, we could get your feedback, and you'd be an integral part on helping us develop this program. So please, again, if you're interested in signing up, that link will also be below in the description. Again, I'm Bernie, and on behalf of myself and Michael, I want to wish you again all the best going forward, and we'll look forward to speaking with you next week in our next podcast topic. Have a great day.